The stabbing of two people in South London by a convicted terrorist could have been prevented, says an inquest jury. Sudesh Aman launched an attack in Streatham last year while under surveillance after being released halfway through a prison sentence. The inquest has ruled that Aman was lawfully killed by police, but that he could have been detained in the days before that attack. We'll have the latest. Also this lunchtime. The Taliban continues to tighten its grip on Afghanistan. Amnesty International says 9 members of a minority group were tortured and murdered by their forces.
There was a lot of fighting with Hazara ethnic militias supporting the US military in this area. And so whether it was an ethnic reprisal or a government reprisal, we've seen all of this in the last few months.
Here, long-term youth unemployment hits a 5-year high. 200,000 under-25s have had no work for more than 6 months. And there's been a record number of bids to be the next UK City of Culture, with 20 areas in the running.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, Georgia Hall remains right in the thick of things at Carnoustie on the second day of golf's Women's Open.
69 to go with yesterday's 68.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The stabbing of 2 people in South London by a convicted terrorist could have been prevented, an inquest jury has found. Sudesh Aman launched an attack in Streatham last year while under surveillance after being released halfway through a prison sentence. He was shot dead by undercover officers after he stole a knife from a hardware shop and began making random attacks on members of the public. Jurors today found his killing had been lawful. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford.
Sudesh Aman leaving his probation hostel, a hoax suicide belt under his camouflage jacket, concealed by a JD sports bag. 35 minutes later, 2 armed surveillance officers shot him dead outside Boots.
This ain't real.
In the immediate aftermath, witnesses couldn't believe their eyes. But police quickly realised he was wearing the suicide belt and cleared the area. Aman died before they could be sure that it was fake. Aman had been arrested aged 17 on suspicion of preparing terrorist acts. Searches of his mobile phone and social media showed the depths of his extremism. He was jailed for 40 months for possessing and sharing terrorist material. But under the rules at the time, he had to be released halfway through his sentence. He was held in Belmarsh prison and, if anything, during his time there became more radical, mixing with Hashim Abedi, the brother of the Manchester bomber, Ahmed Hassan, the failed Parsons Green bomber, and Abdullah Ahmed Ali, the leader of a plot to blow up planes with liquid explosives. The prison's Mercury intelligence system recorded that Aman, also known as Faraz, wanted to kill the Queen, become a suicide bomber and join ISIS. A pledge of allegiance to the leader of the Islamic State group was found in his cell. A senior counter-terrorism officer, Detective Chief Superintendent Alexis Boone, wrote to the prison governor asking if there was a way of delaying Aman's release, but there wasn't. So the decision was made to follow him with armed surveillance officers wherever he went. They watched as he bought aluminium foil, parcel tape and drinks bottles in Poundland. They knew these could be used to make a fake suicide belt, but felt they didn't have enough to arrest him or recall him to prison. And so it was that on the 2nd of February last year, 10 days after his release, Aman was being followed through South London by a 9-man team of armed surveillance officers.
When he went into the low-price store here on Streatham High Road, an officer being called BX87 to protect his identity was only a few metres behind.
Aman stole a knife and ran out of the shop. BX87 gave chase. Aman stabbed 2 people as he ran along. Thankfully, both survived. Frightened shoppers watched on as another officer, BX75, joined the pursuit. When Aman turned on the officers, they feared for their lives. They said they had no choice but to shoot him. The jury concluded it was a lawful killing.
The jury was directed to return that conclusion of lawful killing because in the end the evidence at the inquest made it quite clear that the two undercover firearms officers who were running after him down the street could see that he was stabbing people, and when he turned on them they honestly believed that he could either attack them or others. And so, to a funny sort of way, that conclusion from the inquest was almost set in stone. So a lot of the time was spent at the inquest looking at what should have been done on that Friday night when Sudesh Aman had bought those items from Poundland, items which in the past had been used to make hoax suicide vests. There was an emergency meeting that evening, a discussion of whether these things were being bought to make a hoax suicide vest and what could be done. Should his room be searched? Should he be arrested? Should he be recalled to prison? And all of that was examined in the inquest. In the end, a question was put to the jury. Should it have been that he was recalled to prison that night? And the jury have spent since Wednesday lunchtime considering really that issue. And in the end, they concluded that yes, there was a missed opportunity. It would have been possible to recall Sudesh Aman to prison on that Friday night because by the rules, the probation service could recall someone if satisfied that someone's behaviour indicated an increased or unmanageable risk of serious harm to the public, or that there was an imminent risk of further offences being committed. And the jury have clearly felt that, well, actually, when someone's bought the materials for a hoax suicide vest, there's no other really good reason for them to buy those things, then that could mean that that man's risk has increased and he should be recalled to prison. Of course, if he had been recalled to prison, that might have only delayed any attack because he would have had to have been released then 20 months later. And this was a man who was so radical and was mixing with so many radicals in prison. The chances of de-radicalising him seem to have been very, very, very low.
Daniel, thank you. Daniel Sanford. The Taliban is tightening its grip across Afghanistan, and there are growing concerns about religious and media freedoms under the new regime. The human rights group Amnesty International says the group murdered 9 men from the Hazara minority last month. Some of them were tortured. And the German broadcaster Deutsche Welle says Taliban fighters carried out a door-to-door search to try to find one of its journalists. He had left the country, but they shot dead one of his relatives. Our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams has the latest.
The long, desperate wait for relief. All around the heavily guarded airport, thousands of Afghans still desperate to get out. People with British and other Western passports, hoping their names are on the list. Helman Khan, an Uber driver from West London, was about to make it through. In the thick of it, British troops, trying to make sense of the chaos. And all around the airport, pockets of people waiting out in the open. With time running out, the operation is gathering pace. Western nations want to have all this done by the end of the month.
We're focused on accelerating the evacuation as best we can. In the last 24 hours, we brought out 963 people, which is a significant acceleration on the 24-hour period before that, and we'll at least match that number again today.
In the city, a heavy Taliban presence. Fighters have flooded the streets, sending an unmistakable message of complete control. It's the Muslim festival of Ashura, Afghanistan's Shia minority celebrating peacefully with no sign of interference from their new Sunni masters. When the Taliban last ruled the country, they persecuted Shia Hazaras. Amnesty International says it may be happening again.
What we have seen in the areas we can get reports is there's often reprisals against people for being associated with the government or being associated with the Americans. There was a lot of fighting with Hazara ethnic militias supporting the U.S. military in this area. And so whether it was an ethnic reprisal or a government reprisal, I mean, we've seen all of this in the last few months as things have really deteriorated in Afghanistan.
But the Taliban are keen to show another face. In the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif, captured at the weekend, women studying as usual. Is this propaganda, and will it last? Clearly, it's not enough to dispel the fears of those converging on Kabul's airport. This chaotic exodus has now been going on for a week. How much longer will it last? Paul Adams, BBC News.
Well, in the last hour, the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has defended his actions in relation to the Afghan crisis, saying he didn't phone the Afghan Foreign Minister last Friday when he was advised to because he was prioritising security and capacity at Kabul airport. Earlier, it emerged that a call requested by his officials to discuss getting interpreters out of the country wasn't made by him or a junior minister. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley reports.
The Foreign Secretary yesterday afternoon on a conference call with G7 ministers. The government says it's doing everything it can to get British citizens and eligible Afghans out of the country. But last week Dominic Raab was on holiday and now he's under pressure for failing to make a call to Afghanistan's foreign minister to try and speed up the evacuation of interpreters who'd worked with the UK. Yesterday, the Foreign Office said the call had been delegated to a junior minister. Today, the government confirmed it hadn't happened at all.
I don't think that any one phone call at the back end of last week would have changed the trajectory on either the speed at which the government of Afghanistan fell, nor the speed at which we were able to get the air bridge up and running.
And in a statement this afternoon, the Foreign Secretary said he was prioritising the situation here, Kabul's airport, and getting as many people out as possible. He confirmed he'd asked someone else to make the call. Dominic Raab added, the government's approach to prioritise security at the airport was the right one. But Afghans who've settled in the UK are worried about how long there is to get others out under threat from the Taliban.
There are wild terrorist groups who don't trust democracy, human rights, women's rights, nothing at all. Killing a human for them is like you're just playing with a toy. That's what it looks like for them.
Farouk says evacuating other interpreters should be a priority.
It should be an urgent action, but sadly, it's not going to happen. It's urgent.
Labour says the government has been too slow in Afghanistan and the Foreign Secretary should go.
The senior aides around Dominic Raab that were recommending that he make that call, they will not have been making that recommendation unless they had clear information which demonstrated that it would be a very good thing to do and would deliver a positive outcome, potentially even save lives.
Ministers say they are now moving at pace to get people out of Afghanistan, and the Prime Minister will chair another meeting of the emergency Cobra group this afternoon. But the government's critics say it was underprepared for the march of the Taliban, and that when it came, ministers acted too slowly. The Foreign Secretary shows no signs of resigning, but pressure on him and the government continues. Nick Eardley, BBC News, Westminster.
The SNP and the Scottish Greens have agreed a new power-sharing partnership at Holyrood. The deal would take the Greens into government for the first time anywhere in the UK. It would also give the Scottish Government a majority to pass legislation, including a new independence referendum bill. Let's get more from our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon, who's at the First Minister's official residence, Bute House in Edinburgh. So explain the significance of this, Lorna.
Well, Jane, at some point within the next hour, we expect the co-leaders of the Greens to arrive here at Bute House, where, alongside Nicola Sturgeon, they will give more details of this power-sharing partnership. We've never seen anything like this before. It stops short of a formal coalition, but it goes further than the confidence and supply issue-by-issue support that the Scottish Greens have given to the SNP during previous SNP administrations. It means there'll be areas where support has been formally agreed, but worth watching out for this afternoon are those areas where there's still some disagreement, where the Scottish Greens remain outside the government tent, in effect in opposition. What's in it for both sides? Well, it's significant in that it'll be the first time the Greens have been in power anywhere in the UK. They'll be able to influence policy. We expect them also to have ministerial appointments. For the SNP, I think it does give them perhaps more stability in government. It means they'll have an outright majority in some areas of their programme, although not all, of course. And I think it also sends a message ahead of COP26 about where they stand on environmental issues. And as you mentioned, making the Scottish Greens part of government clarifies that majority that already exists in the Scottish Parliament in favour of another independence referendum. Well, we're already getting response from the opposition here in Scotland, with the Scottish Conservatives describing this as a coalition of chaos, saying that the SNP have lost the plots for the Greens to have a seat at the government table.
Thank you, Lorna Gordon. There's been an unexpected drop in retail sales, which fell to their lowest level since the shops reopened in April, when lockdown restrictions were lifted. Our business correspondent Emma Simpson is at Bicester Village shopping outlet in Oxfordshire and sent this update.
Yes, a sharp fall in retail sales, but there are a couple of key factors at play. Firstly, we spent less on groceries. That's because we spent a bit more on going out, and that's not surprising given the further easing of restrictions, so-called Freedom Day. And remember, we had the Euros in June, which was great for supermarket sales. Now, the other thing, beautiful day here today, but we had such topsy-turvy weather. Remember the torrential downpours? Now that will have had a real dampener on non-food shopping out on the high street, although online sales did pick up. So although we had a huge fall month on month, much worse than expected, the sales are still higher than pre-pandemic levels, and of course a lot better than last year. Now, another thing to mention this morning is Marks and Spencer. They put out an unscheduled trading update saying that they expected profits to be better than expected. Now, I can't recall the last time M&S did this, and they're saying sales are better than expected, including clothing and home. So momentum there. Now here at Bicester Village you won't find M&S. This is a designer outlet, 160 brands, and they have relied on foreign tourists, especially Chinese visitors, to drive sales. But interestingly, domestic visitors, the business is up 20% compared with 2019. And they're not just out and about here today, I'm seeing plenty shopping bags too.
Our business correspondent Emma Simpson. The time is 17 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The stabbing of 2 people in South London by convicted terrorist Sudesh Aman could have been prevented, says an inquest jury. Still to come on the programme, the subscription site Onlyfans, known for its adult content, has announced it'll block sexually explicit photos and videos.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, we'll have news of Rafa Nadal, whose season is over because of a foot injury. He's another top player who'll be missing from the US Open, which starts at the end of the month.
A BBC investigation has discovered that up to 4,500 people were unlawfully detained in police custody in England and Wales because of delays in transferring them to mental health facilities. A Freedom of Information request led to the publication of a sensitive government report from 2018. The government says it is committed to supporting people experiencing mental health crises. But it's understood that unlawful detentions are still happening in some areas. Our Home Affairs correspondent Sean Dilley has this report.
I was in bed and he came into my room with a pillow and put the pillow over my face. And I managed to push him away and asked him, why are you doing this to me? And he says, my thoughts are telling me, if I kill you now, I won't experience the pain of you dying when I grow up.
This is Blue.
This is Thomas, Annette's 15-year-old son. Earlier this year, he twice attempted to take his mother's life, but she insists he's not a killer and he's not a criminal. Instead, she says, he was experiencing an acute mental health crisis.
The next thing I could hear them saying, right, we're going to arrest you on suspicion of attempted murder. My heart sank. I didn't call them to have him arrested. I called them to help him.
Thomas was taken to Southend Police Station. The next day he was identified as needing hospital admission, but it wasn't until 3.5 days after his arrest that he was found a suitable bed. Essex Police said that after his arrest Thomas was bailed. Following his release from custody, they supported him in a safe environment within Essex Police premises, in a specially designated room for vulnerable children, while they worked hard with their partners in health and social care to find the best place for him to receive the care he needed. But Thomas's case isn't isolated. We used freedom of information laws to force publication of a sensitive 2018 government report that estimated there had been up to 4,500 cases where people experiencing a mental health crisis had been unlawfully detained in police stations in England and Wales in a year. A lack of suitable mental health beds was most often the cause. Police sources have told me they've been working closely with NHS partners to reduce significantly the number of times people are unlawfully held until beds become available. Nobody, though, has been able to provide any figures as they're not officially recorded. And the picture's different too depending where you are, with some forces managing to end the practice completely, and in other areas, unlawful detentions are still happening. The national chair of the Police Federation for England and Wales said the dirty little secret continues. And one custody sergeant tweeted that in his large force area, it's a daily occurrence. He said he's not proud to illegally detain people, but sometimes feels it's the absolute right thing to do.
You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
It was the concerns of this recently retired chief constable that prompted the report.
There's a point that comes there where actually somebody could be released from custody, wasn't being released from custody, and at that point I would deem that to be unlawful detention whilst we're waiting for a bed, a mental health bed to become available. A number of my colleague chief constables around the country said that the chief was giving the authority for people to be kept unlawfully in custody, and if there are any challenges that came, then the chief would deal with that.
This approved mental health professional, who prefers to remain anonymous, attends custody and has the power to detain people under the Mental Health Act. But he can only do that when beds are available.
People like me are being asked to do things without being resourced or equipped to do it properly. And I would describe the system as being dysfunctional and struggling to cope.
I felt like my heart was wrenched out of me. It really broke me. They need to put more funding into it. And they need to help people. They need to support these children and adults.
Annette Marshall speaking to our correspondent Sean Dilley. The supermarket chain Morrisons has accepted an improved takeover offer of £7 billion from a US private equity group. There's been a bidding war for the chain. Let's find out more from our business correspondent, Katie Austin. What more is going on here, Katie?
Yes, this is the latest twist in that bidding war. It doesn't necessarily mean it'll be the last. The supermarkets board had previously accepted an offer from a different group called Fortress, but now that recommendation no longer stands because Clayton Dubilier and Rice has come along with a bigger offer of £7 billion. Fortress has, though, said it's considering its options, but if nothing else changes, it'll be the start of October when Morrisons shareholders have the chance to make a decision. Now, the chairman of Morrisons has said that this offer is good value whilst protecting the supermarket's fundamental character. Morrisons is based, of course, in Bradford, where it was founded back in 1899. It owns the vast majority of its stores, and it's also one of the UK's biggest producers of fresh food. Now, both would-be suitors have essentially promised not to make big changes. We'll have to see if that and the price is enough to convince shareholders. But this all comes at a time when there's been a lot of interest and activity from foreign private investors in getting their hands on UK companies listed on the stock market.
All right, thanks, Casey. Casey Austin. About 1 in 85 people in the UK would have tested positive for coronavirus in the week to last Saturday, according to estimates from the Office for National Statistics. The estimated number of infections in England and Scotland fell, although there was a rise in Wales. The pattern was uncertain in Northern Ireland. Government borrowing fell in July compared with a year earlier, as the removal of most COVID restrictions in England gave the economy a boost. Official figures show that borrowing, the difference between spending and tax income, was £10.4 billion, more than £10 billion lower than July last year. But despite that fall, the figure is still the second highest for July since records began, with billions being spent on measures like furlough payments. The coronavirus lockdowns have impacted many sectors of the economy, of course, but some of the hardest hit are young people. Long-term youth unemployment has hit a 5-year high, with 200,000 under-25s out of work for more than 6 months. As the economy opens up, our correspondent Sarah Corker has been speaking to youngsters about their career prospects.
When we first met portrait photographer Drew back in October, COVID restrictions were tightening and his Manchester business was struggling.
You know, I already cut down all my expenses. I haven't left the house in months. I've stopped paying for my office. You know, I've got rid of all of that stuff. And it's not enough.
Today, his outlook is much brighter. As entertainment and art venues have reopened, his bookings are coming back, but he knows the recovery will take time.
What was the longest period of time that you went without any work?
About 11 weeks. Compared to a regular month, I'm still at around 40–50% of what I was doing pre-pandemic. It's building and it's getting there, but it's painfully slow.
During the pandemic, competition for jobs has been fierce. Here in Hull, 20% of people live in workless households. David has 2 degrees and had applied for more than 100 jobs.
You're out of control of your own life by that point as to where's the money going to come. You can't really think long term, so you're constantly thinking about how am I going to get a job.
In the end, he left his home city and moved to Manchester to find new opportunities. He's now working for an organisation which supports disabled people.
If you are the type of person that's applied for a lot of jobs, like, well, anybody has at the minute, I suppose, and you don't get those responses, it can really hurt.
For others, lockdowns led to reinvention. Cece from London quit her job in advertising to follow her artistic dreams.
I've gone from a large office in the middle of Soho to being at home, painting in my bedroom.
And the career change is paying off. She's just moved into her own studio.
Being able to actually work on bigger pieces, have people come to the studio and see the work and talk to them, and it not being in my bedroom, and then, like, on a more practical level, not smelling paint fumes every night and actually not waking up with a headache is really nice.
And while it may take longer for their careers to recover from the pandemic, there is optimism for better times ahead. Sarah Corker, BBC News in Hull.
The subscription site Onlyfans, known for its adult content, has announced it will block sexually explicit photos and videos from October. The announcement comes after BBC News approached the company for a response to leaked documents concerning accounts which posted illegal content. Onlyfans says it goes far beyond all relevant global safety standards and regulations and doesn't tolerate breaches of its terms of service. Our correspondent Noel Titheridge is with me. Explain what this is all about, Noel.
Well, Onlyfans is a British subscription-based social media site that's grown hugely in the pandemic. It now has more than 120 million subscribers who pay a monthly fee or tips for videos and photos. But there have been concerns about underage use on the site. In May, BBC News revealed that Onlyfans was failing to prevent under 18s from selling and appearing in explicit videos, despite it being illegal for children to do so. More recently, BBC News has investigated how content is moderated on the site. Now, leaked OnlyFans documents described as compliance manuals show that although illegal content itself is removed, the website lets moderators give multiple warnings before closing accounts. The documents also state that accounts with higher numbers of subscribers can be given additional warnings where any rules are broken. Moderators have also told BBC News that they found prostitution services advertised, bestiality, and material that one moderator called incest. In reaction, Lady Kidron, who founded a children's charity, Five Rights Foundation, says OnlyFans is wrong to have any leniency in closing accounts. Last night, after BBC News had put its findings to OnlyFans, the company announced that it would ban sexually explicit content and update its terms of conditions to comply with requests from its banking partners. It now says it will allow nudity but not sexually explicit content on the site from October. In response to our investigation, OnlyFans says the documents are not manuals or official guidance and that its age verification systems go over and above regulatory requirements.
All right, Noel Titheridge, thank you. The competition to be the next UK City of Culture in 2025 has attracted a record number of bids. The 20 applicants include Cornwall, a joint bid from counties either side of the Scottish border, and Wrexham. The winner will be announced in May. Colin Patterson has more.
In the week when a Hollywood-style sign appeared on a slag heap overlooking Wrexham, it has been confirmed that the town is now aiming to become the UK's City of Culture 2025. Wrexham County Borough's entry is one of 20 that have been put forward, including a bid spanning both sides of the Scotland-England border. Dumfries and Galloway and the Scottish borders are joining forces with Northumberland, Cumbria and the city of Carlisle, a combined area almost 15 times the size of London. And Cornwall's bid is very much as a county, rather than its only city, Truro. Coventry's time as the City of Culture has not gone to plan. COVID meant that the start was delayed 5 months, but events are now up and running. The 360 All-Stars start a 3-week run there today, and the organisers insist that the city has benefited.
City of Culture is really the beginning of a journey. It's not the end of a journey. It's the beginning of thinking about the role that culture can play in cities, in bringing people together, in creating pride, in expressing identity, in supporting regeneration and economic development, in promoting tourism, and really putting your city on the map.
Back to the days. A long list will be revealed at the end of next month, with the winner announced in May, as Coventry's year in the spotlight comes to an end. Colin Patterson, BBC News.
Let's take a look at the weather prospects now as we approach the weekend. Let's get all the details from Chris Fawkes. Hi, Chris.
Hi Jane, and this month has been a cloudy month, but just like yesterday, although it is cloudy for most of us again today, there are some breaks in the cloud, for example, in Hathersage in the Derbyshire Peak District. But today's weather is driven by low pressure that's just to the west of the UK. We've got this weather front, this thicker cloud you can see in the west, and that's starting to drive outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland. But even ahead of the main band of rain, you can see some patches of rain just working into southern Wales at the moment. So it's going to continue to be quite damp here over the next few hours. The best chance of seeing some breaks in the cloud and a bit of sunshine, well, northern Scotland not doing too badly, and across parts of eastern England there'll be some glimmers of sunshine as well, but otherwise it stays pretty cloudy today. Today's top temperatures range between around 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. Overnight tonight, our rain continues to push northwards and eastwards. There'll be some heavy bursts mixed in and probably some mist and fog patches forming up over the high ground, particularly the moors in the southwest Wales, probably over the Pennines as well. And a very mild night, temperatures 16 degrees for your overnight low in Liverpool and in Hull as well. Now, the weekend does look like it's going to start on an unsettled note with these weather fronts bringing outbreaks of rain. The better of the 2 days of the weekend will be on Sunday, when we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers. Saturday's weather first of all, and you can see the rain really gathering. It's going to be at its heaviest, I think, across parts of Wales and northern England. Eventually, the rain will start to clear away from western areas. So for Northern Ireland, Wales, southwest England, the skies brighten up, sunshine and a few heavy showers. Temperatures at the highest about 22 degrees across eastern areas of England. That's a little bit below par for the time of year. Now for Sunday's forecast, as I say, it's the better of the 2 days of the weekend. Not entirely dry though. The cloud will tend to thin and break to give some sunny spells, and it's in the afternoon that we'll start to see some showers develop, and some of those could be heavy and thundery. The greatest chance of showers, central and eastern areas, whereas further west, Northern Ireland, Wales, southwest England look like it should stay dry as pressure begins to rise here through the afternoon. Now, there's a big change in our weather patterns on the way for next week as high pressure builds in. Notice the winds coming in from Scandinavia, so we've not got a heat wave with this area of high pressure. The hot air stays across southern Europe and the Mediterranean. But nevertheless, that said, it's still going to be a pleasant spell of weather next week with largely dry conditions, quite a bit of sunshine coming through, and that'll make quite a nice change. Those temperatures reaching the low 20s widely, and in the August sunshine, that's still going to feel pleasantly warm. That's the latest weather. Jane.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much, Chris Fawkes there. Just a reminder now of our top story. The stabbing of 2 people in South London by convicted terrorist Sudesh Aman could have been prevented, says an inquest jury. And that is it from the News at 1 team, so it's goodbye from all of us. On BBC One, let's join our news teams wherever you are now. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.